misunderstood is now being recognized, named, and supported far earlier in a person's life. It's also worth noting that autism doesn't look the same in everyone. Boys are diagnosed roughly 3 to 4 times more often than girls. But researchers are increasingly believe this gap partly reflects underdiagnosis in girls and women, whose traits can present differently and are often missed. This is one of the many reasons conversations like today's are so valuable, because lived experience, clinical insight, and community dialogue together paint a fuller, more accurate picture than statistics alone ever could. To guide us through the clinical and practical realities of autism today, we are joined by Dr. Oge Ilozue, a general practitioner with first-hand experience supporting patients and families navigating diagnosis, care pathways, and everyday life with autism. Over the next 30 to 40 minutes, she will share insights from the front line of primary care and will open the floor for your questions. So please use the chat or you raise your hand as we go. Before we begin, I'd like to set the tone. There are no wrong questions here. Autism is a spectrum, and every family's journey is different. Let's approach today with curiosity, empathy, and respect for the range of experiences represented in this room. And I can see it's filling up. You can use the chat function. And when you do, please also remember to tell us where you're joining us from. With that, Dr. Oge, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sapong. Really wonderful to be here back on the Health Hour with Khan on this really important topic. So I'm coming from the perspective of a healthcare professional, a GP, supporting families pre-diagnosis, after diagnosis, and all the way through. Also, increasingly, we're having adults present thinking, actually, is this something that they need to look into and seeking diagnosis as an adult? So there's a huge spectrum. It's part of one of the conditions of neurodiversity. So neurodiversity versus neurotypical, there's a significant proportion of our population that are neurodiverse, and autism fits into that. It's also registered as a disability, so also has protections under the Equality Act, but it can be very difficult for people to navigate sometimes. So this session is about myth busting. There's a lot of myths, a lot of stigma out there, but the richness of these discussions is always in the question and answer, and the discussion we'll have after a short presentation that I've put together. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get started. But wonderful to be with you all this morning. Please let me know you can see it fully. I can't see anyone.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Okay. So the main topic of these slides are some of the common myths that we've heard about autism. I'm going to cover briefly what autism is. It can't be covered in this time, but briefly touch on the definition and the rough diagnostic criteria. I'm going to go into some of the common myths about what's the cause, how you diagnose, and also communication abilities, and some takeaways. But like we already has been said by Dr. Sapong, it is a very, very varied condition. Everyone is affected differently. Every family is affected differently. So it's important that we create safe spaces where people can come with their questions, their queries, their challenges, so that we can try and cover and meet people where they are. So what is autism? I went on a session last year teaching that talked about the definition. We used to say autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, and that's not recognized as a term now. Autism is a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition, and there's diverse profiles. People present with very diverse profiles: communication, sensory processing, cognition, adaptive functioning in terms of day-to-day, and different and varied support needs. Support is needed, but it's massively variable. So it always has to be personalized to that individual in front of you. The three main diagnostic criteria: one, on social communication and interaction; two, there's certainty, routines, and familiarity; and three, there's sensory processing differences. So the spectrum is absolutely multidimensional. It's not a single, there's mild autism and severe autism. We used to use the term Asperger's to kind of specify as a milder version of autism, but that's not used anymore. So we also we prefer autism or autistic spectrum condition. So it just shows that it is a spectrum, and again, you have to personalize that care and support to the individual in front of you. The support needs can change with age, environment, health, stress, and also what is access to adjustments. There should be adjustments in school. Children should have educational support plans. SEND should be there to support. There should be also adjustments if you're at work, adjustments if you attend GP appointments or hospital appointments. So, but the access can be variable and very much hit and miss at times. So we all need to be better, even as healthcare professionals, at making those adjustments. An assessment should cover the whole developmental pattern. So it's not just about one thing that a child or an adult does, it's the whole pattern. And part of the assessment absolutely dates right back to childhood if you're going to be diagnosed as an adult. If you are diagnosed as a child, people may see behaviors emerge in about 18 months, 2 years, but you can't like label people early, and the official diagnosis is usually made if you're going to make it early, between 3 and 5 years old, and it's done by a developmental pediatric multidisciplinary team. It's a whole, so your GP can't diagnose, your auntie can't diagnose, your friend who has an autistic child can't diagnose that child or that adult, even because like I said, more adults are being diagnosed in adulthood, needs to attend a specialist center, and it's usually a multidisciplinary approach. So myths, why do they matter in clinical practice? The myths can delay diagnosis, and we know that autism can be delayed in girls and women. Women are diagnosed much later than men and boys. If someone is a fluent speaker, and also we know that people with autism have very strong, they have to operate in the neurotypical world that's not built for them. They have a lot of masking, which takes up a lot of energy, but they can on the surface appear like everyone else, but that takes a lot of internal energy and stress. So if someone has a really good, strong masking strategies that they've learned from childhood, then that diagnosis may be delayed. It can lead to blame and unnecessary treatments or false reassurance. And clinicians, so this is us calling us out, we all have to be accountable. We can also miss co-occurring conditions such as anxiety, depression, ADHD, sleep problems, epilepsy. All these can exist in parallel, but it doesn't mean that it's just one thing. People can have several of these conditions all at once. So good care, we need to communicate and repeat the communication, do it in different means, and also focus on what the person can do and what do they need. That personalized care is really important. Autonomy is crucial. How does that person want to be addressed? What does that person want to be able to do? Ask and check and recheck in. And also making sure people are safe and are able to thrive and have a good quality of life. So I'm a vaccine clinical advisor. I'm a GP, so I vaccinate children and adults. So I have to address that big elephant in the room. I hear it every week in my practice that people are really worried about vaccines causing autism. There's a lot of information out there. It's overwhelming, it's stressful. And since COVID, we've had a plethora of even more anti vaccine propaganda in the media. And I understand it. People want the best for their family and their children. Absolutely. All medications and vaccines can cause side effects, but we have categorically looked at the evidence. We have to base things on population health and a risk benefit balance. So we've had large studies that don't show a link between vaccines and autism. So in particular, the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella, we've now added varicella, which protects against chickenpox. So it's the MMRV. That's the one people really worry about with autism. And the original paper that was published about it was removed. And we've had many papers since then not showing a link. But ultimately, because where there's a gap in knowledge, people fill it with different information. So we don't actually know the cause of autism. We know it has strong genetic, other basis. There may be something in the environment, but we don't actually know. We do know that there's no link between vaccines. We vaccinate millions of children. It's one of the strongest public health measures to protect against some really horrible, nasty infections. So we haven't found a link between vaccines and autism. Another myth is that autism is caused because you're bad parents, you're spoiling that child, poor attachment from early childhood or that baby period, or as our people will say, we are Africans and Caribbeans in the room, witchcraft. And we know that the reality is that we don't know all the reasons why someone develops autism and someone else hasn't. There is a strong genetic neurodevelopmental basis, but parenting cannot cause it. You did not do anything, wrong. It isn't about bad parenting, good parenting, soft parenting, harsh parenting. It's not about that at all. And it's not your village people. So we need to debunk that myth of witchcraft, village people causing this issue with your child who may be facing a diagnosis of autism. So diet, some people think that diet can cause it or it can cure it. There are, like I said, there's lots of overlap. A child can have celiac disease, which is an intolerance to gluten. They can have severe food allergies and intolerances, but it doesn't, and it can make things appear better, like sleep and other symptoms. But no diet has been shown to cause or cure autism. So we need to treat those conditions. If you have a deficiency, an allergy, an intolerance, or any nutritional deficiencies, I always find a way to bring in vitamin D for our people in these talks. We all should be in vitamin D. We've had a beautiful hot summer, but winter is coming. So we should all be on supplements and giving our children supplements as well. But no vitamin, no nutritional, no one diet can fix it. And again, remember, it's varied in different people. So you have to really look at the individual in front of you. But diet cannot cause or cure autism. And people think that autism, like I said, it goes back to that previous definition of a disorder. It's a mental illness that should be cured. And it's not. It can co-occur with mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, even the more serious, severe illnesses like bipolar or schizophrenia. They can all co-occur, but we should identify and treat each in their own right, even if it's present in an autistic person. So there's a myth that children will grow out of it. They will develop and will become like everyone else. And in reality, it's a lifelong condition. Presentation support needs may change with age and with learning to adapt, with learning those strategies, because you are operating in a neurotypical environment as well. Masking and which environment you're in also depends on that support, which is one of the reasons we're doing this talk, because we want to highlight the importance of that wraparound support throughout that person's journey of life. So it's not a childhood condition. It can be recognized in adolescence. We're having more adults go back and think about their childhood and get a diagnosis in adulthood as well. So you can go to work, have marriage, have children, and people are being diagnosed later and later. So nothing rules out autism, and it's not just a diagnosis of childhood. It is not just a condition that exists in children. So the idea that all autistic people have an intellectual disability, learning disability is a separate condition. And of course, you can have both together. But again, there's a wide range in that, and it needs a separate assessment. And also ADHD, a lot of people overlap. And there's a common thread of people can be autistic and have ADHD, but you can be autistic without ADHD. You can have ADHD without autism. You can have a learning disability and autism, or both without. So it's important that they're all diagnosed and assessed on their own right. But of course, it can coexist. That's why people don't fit into neat boxes and neat diagnostic boxes as well. There's a myth that all autistic people are geniuses or very good in one area, savants. And that happens in the minority. That's why the term Asperger's is not as commonly used. You may have exceptional skill and focus in one area, but it doesn't remove you may need support in others. So it's really about debunking that myth to say that we need to be more open minded and also more curious about the individual and their whole selves. So, autism is diagnosed in boys, usually earlier, and they're diagnosed more often. But girls and women can be missed because we may be good at people argue multitasking, camouflaging, different presentations. So we do need to not rule out autism just because someone's a female, socially, motivated, inclusive, and out there, and verbally fluent. It doesn't mean that autism may not be there. So it's important to still, like I said, have that curiosity and explore if someone is presenting thinking that they may have a challenge in this area. The myth is that all autistic people lack empathy, and that is not the case. The evidence does not support the simple absence of empathy. It's not as simple as that. So differences are reported, and there's wide individual variation again. And so it's linked to that. It's a myth that autistic people don't want to have friends or relationship. Absolutely not the case. Many value that friendship, intimacy, and relationships like we all do. I always say we're built with fellowship with each other. But they're different social styles. They're different ways of conserving energy, especially if you're out there masking just to get through your day to day. And they're different ways of communicating and the frequency. So it's about getting to know that individual once more. And then if a person doesn't speak, they do not understand. Sometimes autistic children don't speak till later on. That speech may be delayed, not in all cases, but speech and understanding are not the same. People may communicate in different ways, writing, gestures, any other ways. So it's important to, again, get to know that person and their preferred communication style. Eye contact, kind of linked to the empathy thing about good eye contact rules out autism. And the NICE guidance, which is some of the diagnostic criteria we use, says not to rule out autism just because the child or person makes good eye contact, are smiling or affectionate. These can vary, and also that masking and camouflage, because people learn very quickly what makes people feel comfortable. So they will do it for the other person. And so it's complicated basically, and not as simple as if you have eye contact, you can't be autistic. Big myth is autistic people are violent or dangerous in some way because they're different from others, and it doesn't. There's about understanding behind the behavior. So I learned in the course I went on recently that the sensory processing and the way that we can hear like a noise, maybe drilling outside, and we're irritated by it if you're neurotypical. Some autistic people, they feel that noise interference as physical pain, and it can prevent them from actually doing anything else. So that's one example. So it's experience, that sensory processing is experienced in a different way from everyone else. So that may promote like that self-care. You need to care for yourself, and it may come across as aggression or difficulties, but it's distress, and it is about very carefully and curiosity, seeking out what is it that's causing distress in that particular situation. Also, is that person ill and maybe can't communicate what's going on? There's also substance use and what's going on with that environment. So again, and autistic people can be more victims of bullying, harassment, abuse, or exploitation, whether in school or outside of school, in the workplace, out and about. The world can be quite a dangerous place for them. So it's important to really assess things as in that unique, individualized way. So the spectrum is not a straight line from mild to severe, very much multidimensional, much more complex. So it's important to describe the support that's needed in the context rather than saying someone is mild, someone is moderate, someone is severe. And the idea that we're all on the spectrum, we may have all said it, we all have autistic um, tendencies. And of course, autistic like traits occur in the general population. We're all people and humans. But autism itself is a persistent developmental pattern. And there's a history that dates back to childhood, and it has a major functional impact on day to day life. So it's important it's identified, labeled, and the support is given as required. So we're having increased diagnosis. Everyone, it seems like we're hearing more about it. We're coming across it, whether in our own families or families we know. So there is fear and misinformation about that cause. And the prevalence has increased, but we are more aware of it. We're calling it out. We are making sure we are bringing it to the light. You know, it's something that may have been hidden. People hide away that child from general society, but it's important that people feel safe to come out and be involved. So we are screening more, so we're diagnosing more. So that may explain a lot of the rise in prevalence that we're seeing over the last years. It can't be diagnosed by a blood test or one scan or questionnaire. There is no routine biomarker. We've not identified a specific gene that causes it. So it remains clinical. And like I said, it's a multidisciplinary team in a specialist center, and they go back developmental history, observation, questionnaires, examination. It's a whole range of different criteria to reach the diagnosis. So I wanted to talk about, we'll go into questions and things. So I wanted to highlight these two social media accounts that has taught me a lot. I love following these two families. One is Eden Rose Project. They have two daughters with living with autism. So Eden Rose's story offers that glimpse into her individualities, abilities, and the challenges in the wider family context. And her younger sister is autistic too. And raising Kevin. Tola and Kevin share just honest and positive view of life in a young adult, navigating family relationships, independence, working, getting his paycheck. It was very exciting when he got a job a few months ago, and everyday experiences and those personal milestones. So I love these platforms, which are out there on the public forum. I encourage people to dip in, and I'm sure there are many others out there. These are just the two that are on that I follow that I've learned a lot from. So, some of my final takeaways as I open up to some questions and discussion. So, we can't be replacing one stereotype with another. We need to separate autism from other potentially co occurring intellectual disability or learning disability, ADHD, any other mental conditions or physical conditions as well. We can't look at if someone is so called well spoken. What does that mean anyway? If they make eye contact, if they're employed, or academic achievement, oh, it can't be, or it must be. We can't assume. Don't ever assume. And we can't think that if someone is non-speaking or non-verbal, that they must need extra lots of support. Again, it's a very individualized, personalized approach, and checking in constantly with that person and their families about what support is actually needed. And the whole picture, I always talk about we are whole people. We're not just one organ. That's why I love general practice. We approach things from a holistic viewpoint. So look at the whole picture and assess that individual's actual support needs, not assumption of what is needed by the population with autism at large. And I just wanted to end with this. It's been a really rough couple of weeks. We've seen the just horrible situation that happened with Professor Jason Arde, the media witch hunt we saw, the poor representation, the racism, let's just call it out as it is. And any Black academic, any family with a member with autism, it's been particularly hard wearing these last few weeks, sorry. Um, sincere condolences to Professor Jason Arde's family and friends. There was a very moving, I saw the pictures, wasn't able to make it, vigil in Trafalgar Square last week. And I came across this page called Everything Good about Jason Arde. And it's students and different people that knew him in person. They're changing the narrative of some of the terrible things we saw online of who he actually was. And nothing can take away from his most incredible achievements of what is possible with someone with autism. So I just wanted to take this moment and end my talk with a tribute to someone who was very visibly autistic, and we've had the recent tragedy, and also recognize that there's a way to change some of the narrative, and people are doing some great work out there. And there's a GoFundMe page as well available to raise money, and they're trying to build something in terms of legacy going forward. Rest in perfect peace and power, Professor Arde. Thank you for listening, and really looking forward to your questions and the discussion we can have. We probably have 10 or 15 minutes for this now. Thank you. Can't hear you, Dr. Sapong. Is it just me?
No, no, I've done
Never.
that. Um, yes, may the professor rest in peace, and may his legacy transcend generations. Now, thank you very much, Oge, for that lovely presentation. It was very nicely put together, and the timekeeping was excellent. Thank you. Yes. Now, there's a few questions that I'd like to put to you, and for the considerations of time, maybe we can keep the answers as short and succinct as possible. First of all, there's something I think you touched on it before, but there's a whole lot of discussion on gut physiology
Mm.
and autism. Would you like to touch on that a little bit for us?
Of course. So that's linked to the whole diet. So no one diet can cause autism, and no one diet can cure autism in terms of evidence base that exists at the moment. But there is some really, we're learning more and more about gut health. All of us are knowing we need to do better with our fiber. We know there's lots of neurotransmitters and neural endings in our gut. So that links to our physical health and can really affect how we go about things if our gut and the microbiome, the good bacteria of our gut that can be disrupted by antibiotics, by the food we eat, etc. So we know eating, again, this is going back to something I say in most talks I give. We go back to basics. We're supposed to be eating the rainbow with a diverse range of fruits and vegetables, the colors, to increase that gut micro biome diversity. And that's better for our gut health. That's better for preventing things like constipation. And we know it can be linked and make chronic illness worse or long-term conditions. So autism is long-term. It's a condition that people live with lifelong. If you get your gut to the optimum, your brain works better, everything else works better. So it makes sense to, again, individualize it, because not everything works for everyone. But going back to the basics of eating whole foods, eating a diverse, colorful diet, and making sure you're getting enough fruits and vegetables in. People talk about things like E numbers and, processed, ultra processed foods and lots of fatty, saturated fats, sugary. That is bad for everyone. So in the same way, it may make some symptoms better in an autistic child or adult. It will also be good for the general population. So I always say keep it simple, whole foods, eat that rainbow, encourage that diversity. But gut health and gut physiology is something we're learning more and more is linked to a plethora of conditions. But the evidence is increase the good gut bacteria by eating that whole foods, good general diet.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, let's look at the typical scenario of a young family who have a child who is who's just been diagnosed with autism. What are some of the things that they should look out for? For example, it's been said that there's a postcode lottery about
Mm,
the the level and the depth of disability provision across boroughs in this country. Is that something really worth focusing on? What kind of home support? Well, let's do that first.
mm. So I think when a diagnosis is made, like I said, it's made in a specialist center, and that specialist center is plugged into a local area. So they will be, it's always a massive amount of information about local support, peer support groups, local school, if that child's in nursery or school, what is going on in terms of what's there, what's the extra support available. There may be, you need to apply through the local council for extra support and educational support plan. And that can vary. You hear all the time about the battle families have to get the support they believe their child may need. And these is for children I'm talking about. Adults is a whole different ball game. And it is about really having to look at the area you're in, and some people carefully choose the area. It may mean moving. Unfortunately, local councils have their individual budgets. They can be a variation in support available from area to area. So I'm in London. Obviously, this is a national forum. We're talking to people potentially in the UK and potentially abroad. But in the UK, people talk about even from borough to borough in London, the services can vary. So I think it's important to really take the time to research what is available, even look a bit further afield, what is available, and then see how you can advocate for your child. Because ideally, we have an NHS, which is a wonderful service here in the UK, National Health Service. But we all know, even within that, things can massively vary. And then there's the educational service as well. So this is overlap. This families need support from
Thank you.
health, from education, as well as social services a lot of times. So there's that overlap, and how do those services interact and talk to each other, and how do we maximize care? So unfortunately, people do complain about a postcode lottery, but it's that's where the peer support, talking to others in similar position and pushing, not necessarily always accepting the first thing you're told, really looking into what else is possible. And that advocacy and that peer support group, I think, can be invaluable in navigating that.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive answer. Um, Now, let's look at the same family with the young child. How would you advise families or parents or brothers, sisters, peers to relate to an autistic person? Um, what sort of um, uh, um, tips would you give for nurturing this autistic person and getting them to lead their best life? What are some of the common things that we um, do when we interact between ourselves that we should be mindful of, or perhaps even avoid when we deal with autistic people?
So I touched about it on it a little bit. There's so many stereotypes and so much misinformation. So culturally as well, because again, we're talking to the whole point of health hour. We're talking to a Caribbean and African population and community. So I think bringing it out to the light, there can be so much fear and also worry about what could be causing it. You know, it's not the devil, it's not witchcraft, and people want it prayed away, so it goes away. I think it's accepting that child in front of you for who they are, knowing that they're, wonderfully and fearfully made. For those of us with faith, will know that Bible passage, and accepting that child in front of you for exactly who they are and their idiosyncrasies and nuances. We all have personality variations, but autism is different. It can present with a unique set of challenges and misunderstandings. But I think it's taking the time to accept that child for exactly who she is in front of you, and then learn what it is, how they approach things. Also understand the reason for that nuance of maybe wanting to eat food with fingers, or there's stimming. I think these are things that reduce the nervous system and calms, and understand that is that child's way of adapting to the outside world, or adults. I keep saying child, but of course adults as well. And accept that person for exactly who they are, and then get to know them. And it's about that relationship. It is about then the supports you can build round as a family. And I think not keeping it hidden, bring out to the light, ask for help. That's why I love those pages that are highlighted in terms of showing some of the very real challenges, but also some of the joy and color that that variety of person brings to those families. So I think the key thing is really accepting that this person, this is who they are, and learning about them and how that may change over time.
Okay. So I try to break this down into relationship with the autistic person at home, and also the relationship in public. I think you've covered this a little bit, but what are some of the things that we can do to ensure the dignity of the autistic person, especially to the outside world?
So, again, the key thing is maintaining that curiosity. As a healthcare professional, we're about pattern recognition sometimes and generalization, and people fit into a bell curve. So, sometimes some of the the interventions are for the majority, but also knowing there's a significant proportion that fall outside of that. So, in terms of interacting and maintaining that person's dignity, that autonomy is always important. Never assume that they're like the other autistic person you may have come across. Really seeking what is it that that person needs at that moment in time, what adjustments in a terms of a professional situation or an educational situation. And of course, home will always hopefully be that safe space where things are, that that person can feel safe and accepted and taken care of. But then what support are you giving to those providing that care as well? So I think that maintaining the curiosity and maintaining that individual personalized approach is so crucial, because not everyone is the same. Um, in the chat, people talk about what about Black and Caribbean people? Where's the cultural, awareness? And I think that goes to show for any condition as well. It's important that you're able to identify as the family or the carer what is it you need, and then be able to advocate for yourself. And if you're not getting it from the first place, going for that second, third opinion if need be.
Okay. Now, this will be two questions put together. It says, any ideas on how best to support individuals with autism, especially when they are unaware or in denial because it is perceived negatively? Now, add to that, how would you advise broaching the issue with an adult that they may have autism? So, two questions in one.
Yeah, so the denial bit is huge. I've had a family member come, and actually, she believes she was married to him for many years and believes he was autistic, but he and his family were in denial about it. And and then even a child was diagnosed, and it highlighted lots of different things. And sometimes that's where people can then look back. I think the reason why there's denial is because there's such negative connotations attached to this label and this diagnosis. And that's what we have to uproot and reverse, and say that actually it's a condition like any other condition that we diagnose. There's strategies to tackle it, to identify, and it's not about a magic wand that will make it go away. This is how someone was made and formed, and there's nothing that will solve it. But how do you navigate and how do you operate? So hopefully things are a little bit easier with life journeys when you understand who you are. You can then hopefully put things in place and strategies that will better protect you going forward. So I think, first of all, debunking that the diagnosis is something negative in the first place is the first place to start. then people may be more willing to say, and then thinking about actually, it's not about the label, it's about what supports and what strategies and what connect what social support, what peer group can we connect you with so you understand more about it. That may then help. But I think we need to be better about talking about it. Like I said, bringing out our experiences out to the light, because you'll be surprised how many families are living out there with someone with autism in their families, but they may have kept it hidden or trying to protect things for fear of it being perceived negatively, and also the misunderstanding of certain behaviors as well. So when we bring these things out to the light, it normalizes it more, and people are able to then feel safer coming out and accepting these diagnoses and conditions.
Okay. Um, Thank you. Um, Now, this person says their son was diagnosed with ADHD and speech delay. What are
Mhm.
the various tests that can be done to test for leaky gut?
Leaky gut. So it's going back to the diet and the
Going
fact that
back to
it's,
the diet, yes.
yeah, diet and physical. Leaky gut is a term that we're seeing more and more. People think it's about, we hear about microplastics, we hear about this thing that causes inflammation, we hear about all these toxins in our food and environment. I mean, you can even, I always say, oh, we can't wrap ourselves up in bubble wrap, but bubble wrap is problematic because there's the microplastics. So it comes a point where you can be so overwhelmed by all the stuff out there about gut health, about diet, about inflammation, about toxins, that you are almost inert. You're moved to stagnation. And I always say, let's go back to we're living in urban environments. We're in the modern world. I always say we should all be back in our villages growing our own vegetables and fruits and rearing our cattle, but we're not. We're in the UK, we're in urban environments where we're reliant on the food industry, we're reliant on the supermarket or the shop down the road. So I think go back to the basics of whole foods, go back to trial and error. If you believe your child has an intolerance and it's making symptoms worse, it's a very, very intricate trial and error to see what agrees, what doesn't agree. And you can exclude, but then reintroduce, observe behaviors, and the test for allergies and intolerances. But just because you don't have an allergy doesn't mean you're not intolerant. So leaky gut in itself is a very broad term. And like we said, we haven't linked one particular diet to cause or cure, but trial and error to see about intolerances and what may make certain things worse. There's no harm in doing that. And you can talk to your GP about it, your healthcare professional specialist. There's sometimes dietitians that can advise, but dietitians go back to that whole food and encouraging that diversity in diets that can be of use for everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Oge. Thank you. Now, there's a couple of questions coming, and then there's a really big one, which um, I suspect when it comes, will contain a few things that you've spoken about already, so we can use that as a summary. But very quickly, is there enough support out there for Black and Caribbean people with autism? How are the NHS supporting these services to suit Black families? Are doctors culturally aware of Black people's health issues?
So that's a huge question. And the short answer is no. There's not enough support. No, the NHS isn't doing enough to support services to suit Black families specifically. And no, most doctors are not culturally aware. But that is why CARN, exists, the Caribbean African Health Network. It is what we are trying to do. This is the bread and butter. And if we need to build it for us and make sure we are advocating and providing that support as a network all across the country. So, and educating the NHS, I'm educating my peers, but that's why we have this health hour. That is why CARN as a network exists, to increase awareness, build those supports, and be able to signpost ourselves to that. But also, we need to build it for ourselves too, which
I
is what
couldn't
we've been
I,
doing.
I, I couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you very much. Now, what guidance or good practice should be employed, particularly during early development years with various agencies that may disregard autism but seek to dismiss neurodivergence presenting in Black children as behavioral problems?
Absolutely. And it's a real issue, the stereotype
Yes.
of bad parenting or just bad behavior and not being curious enough, not looking behind as well. So I think it is, again, that awareness, that self advocacy, that getting another opinion. And it isn't about, throwing toys out of the pram, as it were, but knowing, as a parent, that something is awry or something's not quite there or something, the struggles that you may be having. So it is continuing banging at that door, as it were, with advocacy and getting that other opinion and really separating it in. We can't get away from the fact that we are in a minority, and sometimes here racism will overlap with some of these other issues, and it can be harder to get that diagnosis. It can be harder to get that support once the diagnosis is in place. But again, that is where advocating, really plugging into some of those peer supports to get the information and awareness and get that second or third, fourth opinion if needs be, and doing your research into what is available in your particular area becomes really crucial.
Okay. Now, this is the final one, and I'll have to read it out. Um, my son's teacher keeps saying he's just naughty and disruptive. How
Mm,
do I know if it's behavior or if it's autism they are missing? There's still a lot of shame around this in our community.
yeah,
Older relatives say autism is, quote, white people's thing, unquote, or that it's down to bad parenting. How do I even start that conversation at home? I've heard girls get missed all the time. My daughter copes at school, but falls apart the minute she gets home. Could
mm,
that be a sign, or am I reading too much into it? I think I might be autistic myself, but I'm a grown woman in my 40s. Is there even any point of getting assessed at my age? We asked the GP for a referral, and it feels like we've been waiting forever. Is there anything we can do actually, we anything we can actually do while we're stuck on the waiting list?
yeah.
Once you get a diagnosis, what changes? I don't want my child labeled and treated differently for the rest of their life. Now, there's quite a lot in here. If, as you
There
go,
is.
you think you've missed anything, just ask me and I'll set you straight.
Thank you so much for those questions and being so open and vulnerable. You're not seeing things, you're not, making things up. If you see this, the falling apart at home. Home is a safe space, and so you don't need to mask and pretend in a way anymore. So that's why home environments, that child may come and fall apart. So it's really important to still keep raising these concerns with the school. If you're getting nowhere with the school, raise it with the GP. The waiting list for neurodevelopmental peds and for adult diagnosis of autism is very long. But there is this thing called right to choose. And there's a list of right to choose. They're private providers, but they provide assessments on the NHS. So there's a whole list that are NHS approved, and you can ask that from your GP and they can't refuse it. So that may mean a quicker diagnosis and assessment and diagnosis. And the good question is, what does the diagnosis, the label mean? You don't want to be labeled. But like I said, I think we need to, this is part of talks like this, debunk the negative connotation with the diagnosis. It's a diagnosis, but it's about awareness. And then you build a personalized strategy toolkit of knowing yourself better, knowing why you may have some challenges and difficulties, and then adjusting accordingly. So and then being able to be plugged into peer support. And it's a disability. So you have a right for reasonable adjustments, whether it's at school or at work or when you attend appointments. So it's a way to, for me, it's an empowerment, and you're equipped with not just the label, but then tools to go out and navigate life a little bit easier. That's the idea. You understand yourself better, and then you can help others understand you a bit better. That's the beauty of a diagnosis, even in later life. I have a friend that was diagnosed in her late 40s, and it's been revolutionary in a way that she approaches life as such, and it's been also revealing some of the struggles that could have happened before. So it's really important, I think, if it's important for you to get the diagnosis, it's not just the label, it's then a strategy and a toolkit to then navigate and hopefully make the path a little bit easier going forward and increase awareness around you.
Thank you. Thank you, Oge. I think there's just one more that's popped up. Um, does high heat weather affect some autistic people, especially with what we had in the UK recently?
I'd say yes, it can affect anyone with any condition. But again, it won't be everyone. You can't tie everyone with the same brush. It will be individualized. But high heat, dehydration, exacerbation of other conditions, all these can affect behavior and ability to cope on a day-to-day basis. So I would say yes, extremes of anything, whether it's temperature or weather, etc., or illness, other illness can affect behaviors potentially. But again, it's an individual thing. Not everyone will be affected the same way.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think we've run out of questions, and thank you for the experts and um, uh, the empathy with which you've answered all of these questions. I personally would like to ask you for a copy of your slides, and
Mhm.
I suspect there may be many people who would be interested as well. So maybe it might be something you might consider making available to CAN for dissemination.
And I think it's a topic that we need to explore a lot more together as a, calm community. So hopefully we will hear from other speakers on this topic and also people with
I
lived,
also, yes,
yeah, with lived.
I also like the bit you put in, perhaps unrelated, but about how we should all support CAN
Mm,
in the ways that we can. I don't think we have supported CAN enough historically, but maybe we should all think about what we can do
mm.
to support the work of CAN. Thank you very, very much, Doctor. We're very grateful for your presence and your time, your dedication. And at this stage, I think I will pass on to our friend Peace to close for us this morning. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sapong, and thank you very much, Dr. Oge. I think you did very well hosting Dr. Sapong. Thank you very much. And Dr. Oge, I really appreciated your presentation and how the insights you provided in, the question answering. So thank you very much, both, and thank you very much to our audience who stayed with us. I believe that you've benefited from the presentation today, the engagement, and, the questions that was asked. And I hope that for those of you who asked questions, you found answers based on what the insights Dr. Oge shared. So before we let you go, I will be sharing my screen just to share some announcements and updates here at CAN. Just bear with me. So next week, we will be having another topic. I know Dr. Oge mentioned, the importance of diving deeper into, the topic of autism. And I'm hoping that, in subsequent health hours, we could, talk more about autism. But then next week, it's still the Sickle Cell Awareness Month. So next week is going to be focused on sickle cell in children and young people. Same time, 11 a.m. And then we have Dr. Sama as our guest speaker, and Fumi Vanessa, who would be, providing insights into that topic. So feel free to dial in at 11 a.m. and invite a friend, invite your family members as well to benefit from, the insights that, these professionals provide to us on every Saturday. So on the next slide, sorry. Yeah, so we have the Black History Month recognition evening coming up in October. And so nominations are now open. And this is an opportunity for everyone to show appreciation, give a shout out to people in the community who have, made significant impact and difference in our society. So there are 11 categories that you could nominate from here on my screen, from equity to, equity initiatives, VCFSC collaboration, academic partnership, young change makers, community leadership and empowerment, culture, arts and well-being, innovation and equity, volunteers' contribution. So when you look at these different categories, who comes to mind, which organization comes to mind, which group comes to mind, which individual comes to mind, here is the time to give them a shout out. You could scan the QR code to nominate them, or for more information, email us at events@can.org.uk. And then we have the Black History Month Civic Lunch. So it belongs to everybody, all of us. And the Civic Lunch is where Greater Manchester comes together to open the month, to open the Black History Month, celebrate our heritage and honor the contributions shaping city and nations today. So it's taking place on Thursday, the 24th of September, 2026. So I employ everyone to be in attendance and please invite, friends and family. So please save the date, 24th of September, 2026. And here is another brilliant one. So for those who want to do something related to Black History Month, but you feel like, you don't have the resources available to, execute whatever initiative you have. This is an opportunity, to turn your ideas into reality. So there is a micro grant, community micro grant available, and you can get up to £500 for Greater Manchester Black History Month. So whether it's a Black-led group, a grassroots collective cultural organization, maybe a youth initiative, or a young people's group. So you are able to, make an application. The application closes by 12 p.m. on Friday, the 4th of September. So feel free to scan the QR code. If you know anyone or any organization who you think would benefit from this, feel free to scan the QR code or do a screenshot and share with them so that they can make this application and make their vision come into reality. So this is brought to you by CAN, the Race Equality Panel, and Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And next on the slide, we have, the call for evidence for cardiovascular disease. We want to close that gap. So here is, the call out for evidence on cardiovascular disease. We need to hear from you. So whether you're a clinician, a commissioner, a public health professional or lead, or, a leader or a staff of a community organization, or someone who has just, have lived experience or who have navigated, cardiovascular health, your voice matters and your insight would, shape, cardiovascular health going forward. So please scan this QR code and then complete the call for evidence. Thank you in advance. We also have, this Windrush Compensation Scheme initiative. And if you know anyone who has settled in the UK before 1988 or has a close family member who did, they may be able to claim, be eligible for a claim. And we have, CAN has a free confidential, is offering this for free, and we have confidential advocates who are able to help across the Northwest. So it's not just limited to Manchester, it's across the Northwest, and you have advocates who will be able to explain the process of, the claim, what it's about in plain English, gather the evidence that you have, and support you to complete the claim form. And then you're able to progress to the next step. And all this is at no cost. We're not charging you for anything. It's all for free. To know more about this initiative, please contact Christina or Shola at the number written on the screen, or email us at advocacy@can.org.uk to get the expression of interest form so that you can make a claim for yourself or someone. And finally, we have one of our initiatives called Safe Steps to Find My Sexual Health. And it's more about testing. It's about feeling understood, respected, and supported. It brings confidential sexual health services into community spaces across Lambeth, Southwark, and Lewisham, where there's testing, free condoms being distributed, self-testing kits being available, and then you have the opportunity to get advice and more in spaces that feel comfortable for you to engage. So for more information, please contact the helpline, our helpline number on 077-100-22382, or email us at advocacy@can.org.uk, or feel free to scan the QR code. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Us on Zoom, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Thank you for making the Health Hour part of your Saturday. We hope today's session gave you the right dose of health wisdom that you can share with your friends and family. When we share knowledge, we strengthen our entire community. Mark your calendar. Next Saturday, same time. Got a topic in mind? We want to hear from you at health@can.org.uk. Health Hour, hosted by the Caribbean and African Health Network.